Okay.
Hi, Facebook friends. Good morning. Helen Archontou, CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. So happy to have some time with you today on this Thursday here on YWTV. Thursday, we reserve for our Share the Mic Now project. We are engaging in a national effort to amplify the voices of Black women, and we have so many wonderful Black women in our community. So I know that you have been getting lots of great information and, hearing some amazing stories from Black women about their experiences. And our hope is those stories and these conversations are helping build us bridges closer to getting to our work of eliminating racism. And we'll also check in at the end a little bit. As you know, we're doing our 21-day race challenge, social equity and racial justice challenge. And I'm hoping everyone is engaged in that and looking forward to hearing from all of you watching how that's going too. So with that, I want to introduce you all to Nicole Davis. She is a friend of the YW and doing amazing work in our community. And we're so happy to have her here today. Let me tell you a little bit about her for those of you that don't know her. If you are a YWTV regular, you saw her on a program that we did recently about food insecurity and our wonderful programs that we have here in the county and how hard they're working to address that issue. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today. But she's also working, every day in her, in her space on addressing systemic and systemic racism and systemic disenfranchisement of Black women, communities of color, and others who lack economic resources to secure nutritious food. So a little bit about her. She's a special events planner by day. Well, I don't know if it's day or night, right? It's probably 24/7, maybe is the better way to put it. She's the special events planner for Center for Food Action, which is Bergen County's largest food pantry. And we'll put a link to that program in our comments so that you can connect with them, learn about their important work, whether or not you need the service or just want to support a great agency. It's definitely someplace to stay connected to. In her role at Center for Food Action, her portfolio there includes producing unique events that engage diverse audiences, include houses of worships, community-based civic organizations, and donors. YWCA is a proud partner and supporter of Center for Food Action. She leads her colleagues in creating signature experiences that raise money and awareness around food insecurity. She's currently enrolled, because that's not enough, because that's not keeping you busy enough, and I know it is, especially at this time, although it was always. She's also enrolled at Drew University School of Theology, pursuing a master's degree in divinity with a social justice concentration. Her hope for the people she serves is for them to live life in totality combined with the gift of faith that the gospel message offers. She is a native of Englewood, New Jersey. She is the daughter of an educator and a nurse, and she understands that being a lifelong learner is essential to living a life of service. She is a graduate of Howard University and a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Inc. Don't leave out the ink.
Yeah.
So, welcome, Nicole, and thank you again for making time to join us again on YWTV. We were so happy that you could be with us in May, and that was such an important conversation and an important show. But we're equally grateful that you could make the time to be with us here to continue that conversation a little bit, but delve a little deeper as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I want to give a shout out to my colleagues and our executive director at Center for Food Action, Patricia Espy, and the great work that we do on behalf of our neighbors here in Bergen County.
Well, so for those who don't know, and I'm sure there's not many, but for those that don't know, can you tell us a little bit about Center for Food Action, that you and the work that you do there, to help, and not only it's just to let people know about it, but also to let people know how to access services if they need them.
Sure. So Center for Food Action is Bergen County's largest food pantry. Our mission is to prevent hunger and homelessness. we accept all clients, no questions asked, which I think is very important as people are facing food insecurity. You can log on to our website to make an appointment. You can call. Um, and we, yep, cfanj.org, and we set you up with an advocate and work through it. Now, certainly because of the pandemic, we've had to shift our delivery method. And we have gone to a contactless service. So literally, people pull up or walk up and we place the boxes of food in their trunk or shopping cart, and that's it. And so the social distancing is there. We've seen a huge increase since COVID hit, and we knew that that was coming. Um, we talk about frontline workers, but frontline workers were not only impacted, but the people who cut your lawn, the people who bust the tables at the restaurants that you eat at. All of those people were impacted with regards to not being able to work for that period of time when we were sheltered in place. So our advocates are very compassionate. I had the great honor to do calls on behalf of our agency because, right, I'm the event planner, but all of a sudden our big old gala was just squashed. It was like, boop, gone. And so we're a small team. So, on our team meeting Zoom, I said, hey, where do we have gaps? Because I can fill in because, we're not really getting ready to do a big gala. And so one of the places that we needed assistance was making calls. And so what happens is people email us or they call in and we set an appointment for them. And the reason that we set an appointment is that we want to manage people's expectations. You're already in a space of confusion in the pandemic, and we don't want a space of hurt to come. So we want to be able to plan properly. So the stuff that they showed on the news that people were in line for a day and they get to the end of the line and there's no food, that's not something that we experience here in Bergen County at Center for Food Action. We are very accurate with the number of people that are coming and the amount of food that we need. So in talking to clients, you heard all kinds of stories from people from all walks of life. So people who were six-figure salary, who something happened to their job and now they're not. People who are living below the poverty line and who are now impacted by not having food. So our goal with the boxes is to provide nutritious food to stretch people out. So you'll find staple items, you'll find tuna, you'll find spaghetti sauce, you'll find bread, milk, eggs, peanut butter, things of that nature. And it's challenging during the pandemic, shall I say, the pandemic made it challenging because of the supply chain. Right. We would talk to people and they would say, well, do you have any toilet paper? Because I'm not sure what happened during the pandemic, Helen, but toilet paper was the greatest commodity.
It was a
roll somebody would give you. I'm not sure what that was. And so our operations department was able to get single rolls, and we were able to say, here's an extra roll of toilet paper, extra roll of paper towels, and all of those things add up when you're just trying to figure it out. We saw a great increase in the need for snacks for children. We do a program called Weekend Snack Pack. And what was happening was these parents, the essential workers who had to go to work, couldn't get to the schools to pick up the meals. So there were just so many things that were so glitchy in the process. And we really just worked to bridge the gap.
Well, we're so lucky that we have such a dedicated and qualified team of thinkers over at Center for Food Action to be able to, guide us through this time and guide families through these glitches that, again, who would have imagined some of, what we're living with at this point in our evolved society, but nonetheless, here we are. And, it's definitely a process. So how did your work now, and your other life experience, which I know, we'll talk about, lead you to your new studies. And or is it new?
Well,
How did that
it's
happen?
it's probably new in the context of showing up, right, and being enrolled at Drew. But I always had a passion for women and girls, and a strong passion and space to walk with people in the grief space. So grief and bereavement. So I've walked with plenty of families to the cemetery, after the cemetery, at the hospital. And that's a very unique space when you are losing a loved one and they are transitioning. It's a very unique space. Every loved one that you lose is different because of your relationship, the time, and all of those things. So I took that experience and kind of married it into this space of social justice, because my thought is that grief is not only associated with the death of a loved one. So in our racial inequality space, grief is linked to, I've applied for that job 3 times, I'm overqualified, and 3 times I've been passed over. But I still have to come in here every day and work and then help the person who's less qualified than I am with the job. So I have a choice. Do I stay? Do I go? And the emotions that wrap around that experience or experiences like those are very similar to grief. So when you lose a loved one, there's anger, disbelief, there's bargaining. Well, God, could I have, saved my mother-in-law? There are all these things which are the same emotions that then happen in our life. And so there was this space where people would tell you, oh, suck it up. That's just life. Life is hard. So you didn't get the job. Go get another job. And that is so much easier said than done. And so that is what led me into going into theology, because there's a thought that God wants all people to do well, right? And we have all these systems of oppression that have been here since the beginning of time. And that's another conversation. But the thought is, what are the things that we can do individually and collectively to help people succeed and to come out of these spaces of disenfranchisement, of living on the margin, of not being in the 1%, 10% that are running the world, right? 1% and 10% are running the world, but they have no idea what the 80%, 90% really face. And we can even break it down further. The people under the 50%, when we look at poverty and we say that a family of 4 is living on $26,000, and you're like, what? And we live here in Bergen County. So sure, we all have friends who, your taxes are $26,000 and you pay that in the blink of an eye. So it's those spaces that really led me into getting some formalized training. And the wonderful thing about Drew is that they really marry the concept of theology and public service. Yeah. So I can't say that like I'm going to run off and be a pastor of a church, but I will be able to come into an organization and bring just a different level of compassion and care for the people that we service.
Yes, I'm actually familiar with that program. We actually have a former team member at the YW who's graduated from it, and he's similar feelings to yours. I've had many conversations with him about why the work, and the draw to that calling, was important for him. So you touched on so much there. I don't even know where to start, but the systems of oppression, obviously, that you've mentioned, and now your formal training, that you're getting alongside with your personal life experience, your work experience, that you've seen. What are some thoughts to share with our viewers about what people are really experiencing. Obviously, you mentioned that some people in Bergen County are living on $26,000 for a family of four, and I know people sometimes can't believe that exists in what is considered a very affluent county.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to make sure that our viewers understand the realities.
Mhm.
Because I think that hopefully will help us continue the conversation to the solutions.
Yeah. And so I think that the realities sit in several different spaces, right? So the realities sit in number one, we live in the Bergen County bubble for those of us that have access. So, we have people that come to CFA and they say, well, where are the poor people? And so
Mm.
it's kind of like, well, they live in your town. You just may not drive down that street. You may deem it, oh, that's not the greatest part of town, and we'll stay on our side of town. So it's number one, dispelling the myth of the Bergen County bubble. I'm gonna make it very local, right? So
Okay.
let's get out of the bubble, and let's understand that the service workers are part of the people that are living in this way. Um, People who have not had great access to education are in this space. We have generational poverty, right? So I live in low housing income housing. My mom did, and my grandmother did, and this is just the way we live. And we fill out the Section 8 application, and nobody thinks it's wrong in their context. So you
Right.
meet people in their context. And or you have the person who had great job in New York City and hit that ageism space, and they very cautiously aged you out, and all of a sudden you don't have a job, but you're on the hook for the mortgage, for the car. Kids were in private school, now they have to go to public school. You're just caught, and these are just the spaces where people are caught, and we have to just really pull it apart. And especially for women of color, and for Black women, because that racism does exist in so many different spaces, because we have to realize that racism is individual, racism is institutional, and racism is cultural. So when we look at those three threads, we have to figure out, where do we as citizens fit in? And so I'm not a racist, but I have thoughts about people that don't look like me, that may not be good thoughts or may not be true thoughts, right? So it's kind of digging in those spaces to help people come to a space of being level. And so the interesting thing about the pandemic was that it made everybody be quiet, because you could not go out. And when you went out, it was eerie, right? So it made everybody be quiet, but then it just really leveled the playing field in the quietness, in the silence. And people began to think. At least we hope they did.
Yes, and we hope they did. So, when we think about this time that we've experienced, right? And as you said, we're hoping that people use the time to think. What are some actions? What are some of your hopes? From again, now your studies and your work and your life experience personally, your life experience, professionally. What are your hopes that will come? What will we see? And what are some of your thoughts about how we can get there?
Yeah, so I think that one of my hopes is that people really dig in. So, um, Breonna Taylor, that you're asleep in your house and they shoot your house up and you die, and they admit that they have made a mistake, but no one is held accountable for the mistake. So my hope is that we can get to a space where we can admit that there's a problem. You know, George Floyd, the trauma, because we have to watch it almost nightly, right? So it's bad enough that he was killed, suffocated, all of those things, but every night on the news or post here and there on Facebook. So you're traumatized. So the hope is that we can take these things as learning lessons and begin to unpack them and begin to walk away understanding more. So I think your 21-day challenge to end racism is a great program. I've put some resources in the chat of books, articles, spaces where people can start. And when I say people, I mean everybody. So whether you're Black, whether you're white, whether you're Asian, wherever you are in your station, you've got to understand what is happening to other people. And one of the ways is by reading, which, you know, some people are a fan of, some people aren't. If not, YouTube has a great version of what you want to read, and get in and dig it out. So for the person who says, well, you know, I just don't think that it exists. If you read credible sources, you will get an idea. So my real desire is for people to do the work, because the only way we're going to eliminate racism, empower women, empower girls, is to make a hard shift from this patriarchal space that our countries and other countries are running, right? So Beyonce has this song, "Who Rules the World? Girls." And we like that. But men are like, we rule the world. But they're coming with a different thought and a different brain, and they're coming from that capitalistic space. We as women should be coming from a heart space, because if I avail my heart to you and to the people, that is how we begin heal. And that's my hope in that healing space.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and I see Natalie's commented on it as well. I mean, credible sources is so key for getting information, for sure. And I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate about the team that put together the 21-day challenge, because it is chock full of credible sources and concrete information. And, you know, there's so much to unlearn.
Right.
There's not only so much to learn, but there's so much to unlearn, because we've been taught so much from sources that are not credible. And we've been taught so much from you know, experiences, you know, and prejudices that have been handed down to us, around us. Again, and it doesn't matter, you know, what walk of life you're from, we're all carrying some type of implicit bias with us, you know, that we need to, you know, that we need to work through. So what have you seen that has been successful techniques to support individuals? You know, you were talking about the grief, obviously, of you know, individuals, you know, not getting jobs over and over again and being passed up, you know, of you know, Black people, you know, having to train, let's say, a white person who has been given the job, you know, for not necessarily having the same qualifications and skills, but just because of our systems and the way that they're set up.
Sure.
You know, how can we support, you know, how can we, you know, identify, call out, and support, you know, when the implicit bias, you know, issues are happening?
Well, I think there are a number of different ways. One that is interesting to me, that a dear friend of mine, Karen in California, who's in the film industry, talks about the +1. And so she says, you have to do a +1, right? So when you get an invitation to a wedding, it's usually you and a guest. traditionally you bring a guest, whether it's a girlfriend, a husband, a spouse, you bring a guest, boyfriend, you bring a guest. And so in the workplace, we have to be willing to subscribe to the plus one theory. So the plus one theory is that whether you are black or white, if you are in a space of power, that you will do more than one black person in your space.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are nervous about it, right? And so there are plenty of qualified black women, black men who can fill these positions, who are educated, who are skilled with a trade to get it done. I'm a strong advocate of historically black colleges. Now, I graduated from one. I graduated from Howard. And what makes me a strong advocate? Because people say, well, that's a black college. Well, let's talk about the institution of college and universities. In order for a college or university to operate, they must be accredited. So there's a great board that does accreditation. So wherever you go to school and whatever program you're in, your program has to be accredited in order for you to graduate, right? So that's part one. So think about that. Part two, for HBCUs is for my Black people and people of color. That is the only time in your life where you will be the majority. Mm. So it's a very crucial 4 years. It's that developmental space. You know, you're 18, you're old enough to vote, but you're not old enough to buy liquor, right? So that 18 to 21 is an interesting space of development. We know that the frontal lobe of your brain doesn't close until you're 26. So it's, you know, that's another conversation for another day, but it's a great space and a great training ground. And the economies of scale, the cost are different than private white institutions or state schools. And so these institutions have a tendency to be smaller, where there can be a greater emphasis on you as a student. So I think that training is key. I also think that, you know, when I went to high school, there was this technical component to high school. And so there were some kids that went to Bergen Tech, which is now the academies, but back then at Dwight Morrow, it was Bergen Tech. And they did automotive, culinary, and something else for kids who weren't necessarily interested in the academics or excelling in the academics. You had an academic core, and then you did this training. So I think we have to go back to that model. You know, even when we look at STEM and we look at this Silicon Valley piece, that we are missing great talent because we just are not plugging into the talent. Mm. And we're not plugging into the talent because of what the talent may look like or the experiences that the talent or potential talent could bring to the table. So I think that education is key, but I also think the plus one, that we must be intentional about bringing people of color, Black women, Black men into the work environment.
Yeah.
And that helps level the playing field.
Yeah, I have to say, I personally try to aspire to it, but I love the plus one theory. And I think that it's something that's so easy for people to do and to, you know, pull up a chair, you know, next to you. I have to say, too, I'm so glad that you touched on the Howard University and the Black college conversation, because it actually hasn't come up yet in any of these discussions. And as I'm talking to you about it, and I thought about this before because I, follow different conversations that people have about the importance, and it's really reinforcing to me that we need to raise that discussion about the importance of that space. I mean, you just raised something so important. You know, that's such a formative time for a young person's development, and to knowing that our society as a whole does not feel safe for the majority of Black people in our country, creating that bubble for them, a different kind of bubble than what we talked about earlier.
Absolutely.
Creating that kind of bubble for Black people does allow them to, you know, reach and grow into their best selves, you know, and there's so much about that I think we need to educate the public at large about, to understand it and not to discredit it, to actually understand that, we all flourish in spaces where we feel safe. Um,
Yes.
so obviously the goal is to create safe spaces everywhere, but
Mhm.
it also does speak to the integrity of keeping and supporting that, those environments that do exist and are obviously of such incredible caliber.
Yeah. And so I'll share a quick story about my Howard University experience that really shaped me in a number of different ways. So in my senior year, my mother developed pancreatic cancer. So here I was turning 21, and here she was 53. And she succumbed to her battle with pancreatic cancer. Her desire was for me to graduate undergrad in 4 years, because we all know that sometimes we take a path and a turn, and it can be longer.
Yeah.
And so I was back at school, and I had a big load. Um, and I went to see one of the professors, and I said, listen, I need to drop your class. My mother died, and it's all too much. And so she looked at me and she was like, I'm sorry to hear that. This is the first I'm hearing that your mom passed away. She said, but this is week 2. And I would that you take these books and really work on this class. I'm not signing your drop slip. I was just like, I thought that if you requested the drop, that they have to sign it. She said, I'm not going to sign it. She was like, so do a couple of weeks and let's see where we get. And then we'll talk about it again. So I just, at that point, I was like, all right, well, I just have the big load and let's do it. And in the end, I did graduate on time. So my mother's dream was fulfilled, although she was looking down from heaven. My family was there and all of those things. But it was that intimate space that she was like, I'm, got your screen. You're almost at the finish line. And if you do this, it's going to make you, not get to the finish line in that way. So I think that in all spaces, if we're taking responsibility for other people, we have to hear them with a compassionate heart and support them and kind of, walk alongside them. Now, as a 21-year-old, I thought she was the meanest thing. I'm like, being dates is mean, but I'm 21, right? So what do I know? Only a little bit. I thought she was the meanest thing, but hindsight is now 2020. Yup, was able to get it done in 4 years. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's that.
Yeah, well, that clearly she gave you a gift and also, helped you realize a dream of your mother's, as well too. So that was a true gift in many ways, for sure. Nicole, I really enjoyed talking to you. I know I said this before we got on the air. I mean, 'cause we were chatting away for all of our viewers, as I often do. But
We had a pre-conversation.
I always feel worst for Christy, who's our magic behind the scenes at YWTV, because she has to deal with me being so excited to everyone we talk to and talk to them before we talk and then talk to them after we talk. So, but I appreciate you sharing so much from your heart today, and it clearly was from your heart. And I'm so grateful that we have you in our community and the work that you're doing and the impact that you're having, one-on-one and collectively, across, an entire community, with your work and your way. It's really very special. So thank you. And, we will obviously, as you know, the YW is your partner. As you know, personally, I stand up and here, and look forward to continuing these conversations. And thank you for, reinforcing for me that we should continue a conversation about our, historically Black universities, and colleges in our country, because I think you touched on something today. Again, that's a wonderful thing about these conversations. They each bring something new. I know Natalie's on here listening today. She inspired me in one way. Tiffany inspired me in another. All of these conversations have really helped, open another door to the conversation, and it helps us keep evolving it for our community. So I thank all of you, but I thank you today in particular.
You're welcome. Thank
for
you.
those of you watching, I hope that you are doing our 21-day challenge. It's our social justice and racial equity and social justice challenge. I do hope that you've taken the time to sign up. And, as Nicole said, It doesn't matter, if you're Black, if you're white, if you're Asian. I mean, this is something that everyone in our community should educate themselves and learn and unlearn. We've been getting such tremendous feedback from those that are doing it about how impactful it has been, and whether there's pieces that are a reminder or some of it that's just absolutely new information. And it's not too late to start, although I want to share that we have over 600 people doing the challenge right now, which seems like a big number, and it is, but my goal for us is that we have 20 people doing it by the end of 2020. So I do encourage all of you involved to invite your friends, your families, your coworkers, your friends, from different organizations you're connected to do the challenge as well. It's easy to send them a link. It's easy to sign up. It's not too onerous. You get the emails. You can catch up with them when you can, for sure. You don't have to feel you have to check them off. We only send them during the week, so on the weekends you can catch up if you need to. But the important thing is that you get exposed to the information, and that it helps you thinking and growing. And in the end, of course, our goal is to create activists and action out of everyone, whether it's being the person that brings the +1, or whether it's being the person that rewrites policy. We want to inspire and educate you to get there. Also, we are in the process of signing up our girls in our community for our sophomores in high school, 10th graders, for Empower University, which is our 10-month leadership opportunity, where they will meet over 50 mentors, women in our community that are doing all kinds of different work to help broaden their life experience, as well as evidence-based learnings on important lessons that I would hope that we all would have had at that age, but we want to assure that they do and learn about money management and climate change and body image, and are learning it with girls that are not necessarily from their town, girls that are walking different and experiencing different lives together side by side. So I do encourage you to get that information out. Applications are being accepted for a few more days as we're getting ready to kick that program off at the end of this month. And again, just a few more days for the census, and we are, on our big countdown, under 50 days now to Election Day. So please make sure that you're registered. Please make sure that you are, educated on the issues and the candidates that align with your value system, and that you're making sure that you understand how to vote this year, because we've got some changes. We'll be having a YWTV episode shortly focused on that as well, to reinforce the way things are now. So with all of that, folks, we hope you have a fabulous day. Thank you, Nicole, for starting us off, in a great conversation and a great mindset. And thank you, everyone who's watching. You clearly have a fan club, as you know, and I'm not surprised. But I'm grateful to you for your work at Center for Food Action. Folks, check out Center for Food Action, the great work that they're doing to support it. And if you know someone or you yourself need their services, we have the links attached so that you can learn more. And also, as Nicole shared, she put some links to some important resources and work that have inspired and educated her. And we hope that you take the time to check those over as well. Everyone have a great day. Nicole, thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.